Hi everyone, this is topic 3, Concept and Teaching of Grammar, Grammar according to Language Use. Introduction. In compliance with the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, the companion volume, and the official curriculum for official language schools, grammatical competence focuses on the knowledge and the ability to use linguistic structures in order to understand and communicate. This implies that grammar is understood to be subject to communication and is therefore to be taught as a means to an end. The field of grammar is generally divided into two main domains, namely morphology, that is the internal structure of words, and syntax, the relationship between the words in the structure of sentences. Grammar may also be defined as a description of the structure of a language and the way in which linguistic units are combined to produce sentences. However, grammar has not always been conceived in the same way, and different grammar views have given rise to different implications in teaching. In this topic, there shall be an attempt to provide a comprehensive theoretical and pedagogical framework to understand the role that grammar has played historically and explain its current status in language teaching. Prescriptive grammar. It is called prescriptive because it prescribes what people should do. Prescriptivism is the view that one variety of a language has an inherently higher value than others and should be the norm for the whole of the speech community. Needless to say, these grammars have fallen out of favor in modern academic linguistics since they only describe a subset of actual language usage. Descriptive grammar. Since the 60s, people have felt that language should be taught as it is, and not as it should be. This way, descriptive grammar attempts to describe actual usage, avoiding prescriptive judgments. Modern grammars are descriptive in nature, but it is important to note that they become somewhat prescriptive in the classroom because we're telling our students what the best way of saying something is. Pedagogic grammar. While descriptive grammars may attempt to describe everything there is in the language, pedagogic grammars are designed to be of help to teachers and students. A pedagogical grammar is a formulation of the grammar of a foreign language with the objective of the acquisition of that language. Various grammar frameworks, their implications in teaching. Traditional grammar. Traditional grammars, which closely follow the model settled by classical languages, did not attempt to describe the language, but rather to proscribe and prescribe, very often arbitrarily. Among its most important gaps, the following may be highlighted. First, there's no account of spoken nor present-day language. It gives a predominant role to morphology, completely neglecting syntax. It is based on intuition, and it tends to give an exaggerated importance to mistakes to be avoided and to exceptions. The grammar translation method, largely based on this view of language, held that the core of the course was constituted by the knowledge of grammar, which was learned deductively through memorization of rules and examples completely disconnected from actual language use. As a reaction against this method, the direct method was born. The reformers believed, first of all, that the spoken language was primary, that words should be presented in sentences and practiced in meaningful contexts, that grammar should be taught inductively, and that translation should be avoided. Structural grammar. With Ferdinand de Saussure as its founder, this framework views language as a system of structurally related elements, that is, phonemes, morphemes, words, and so on. Grammar is no longer a collection of rules, but rather a list of structures in the form of a framework of slots. On the plus side, Structural grammar holds that a language is what its speakers say, not what someone thinks they should say. Moreover, it accounts for the spoken language needed for communication. Unfortunately, on the negative side, structuralists limited themselves too much without taking meaning into consideration. Moreover, structuralism did not provide the rules needed for constructing an infinite range of grammatical sentences. The teaching method inspired by this grammar was the audiolingual method. Teachers used this framework of sentence slots in substitution tables, which allowed a large number of sentences to be derived from a single pattern. Learning was seen as a set of habits, grammar was taught inductively, and finally, students were not encouraged to initiate interaction since mistakes were to be avoided at all costs. Transformational generative grammar. This started in the 50s with Noam Chomsky, and it is a framework that allows for the categorization of constructions into grammaticality, ungrammaticality, and degrees of grammaticality. Moreover, it distinguishes between surface and deep structures, which is crucial for language teaching. Finally, it provides rules which allow for the construction of complex sentences, therefore providing an excellent basis for teaching of writing. Nonetheless, the transformational generative grammar was very much criticized because it only describes competence, leaving out performance in communicative situations. It also has a limited concept of linguistic competence. It neglects communicative competence and the social, cultural, and functional rules of a language. The teaching implications of this grammar are to be found in cognitive theory and cognitive grammar, where learning is considered as a creative process in which the learner is engaged. Students are asked to think rather than simply repeat. A shift towards language in use, the systemic functional grammar. Systemic functional grammar is oriented towards discourse semantics and highlights the role of language as a resource for making meaning. This grammar is systemic because the notion of system is of paramount importance. Language is not a set of structures, but a semantic system with other systems through which those meanings are encoded, that is, a system network. This grammar is functional because it maintains that the overriding property of language is its functional nature. It is also semantic and functional in orientation and only studies forms in reference to what they mean. This functional orientation is clearly concerned with language in use, and its object of study is actual data produced by interactants in naturally occurring social contexts. This sharply contrasts with Chomsky's grammar, which is basically mentalistic and describes language by using introspection. The place of grammar in teaching. Grammar was traditionally regarded as the core of the language teaching curriculum, but it was seen as a separate entity from the language itself. Now we seem to be suffering the consequences of such a prescriptive method, and communicative approaches emphasize language use over rules of language usage. Now we seem to believe that if students somehow learn to communicate, mastery of the forms will take care of itself, but it won't, it certainly won't, and giving up the instruction of syntax is to allow for the facilitation of interlanguage in simplified form. In this sense, we should come to understand that overt grammatical knowledge and the achievement of communicative proficiency are not mutually exclusive. Even if syllabi are organized in terms of communicative functions, language structures cannot be overlooked. Do we really need grammar to communicate? It is sometimes believed that grammar is not essential to achieve communication. This idea is based on the native speaker's knowledge of the language, the fact that they're able to produce correct utterances without being able to verbalize this knowledge has led to believe that they do not have a grammar. However, a single sentence could not be produced without knowing grammar. Consequently, native speakers do have a grammar, but this knowledge of the language is stored unconsciously in the mind. It is implicit knowledge, and that's the sole reason why they cannot verbalize it. The ability to describe the sentence which has been produced in terms of grammar is something only people who have been taught explicit grammar can do. So one can certainly teach grammar without stating any explicit rules. In this case, what we're trying to bring about in the learner is linguistic behavior that conforms to the rules and not knowledge of the rules themselves. However, when one's students are not well suited for language analysis, or when a particular linguistic rule is rather convoluted, it may make more sense to present grammar deductively and explicitly. Especially adult students usually request rules and report that they find them quite helpful. As a compromise solution, there are many authors who suggest that a combination of both gives the best result. Learning is seen as fundamentally an inductive process, but one which can be controlled and facilitated by descriptions and explanations. Implications for foreign or second language acquisition. What remains clear is that knowledge of the grammatical rules is necessary if one wants to master a language. Grammar is not a separate entity from language, but rather an integral part of it. In this sense, we must come to a broader understanding of what it means to teach grammar. Rather than equating grammar to the teaching of explicit rules, we should see it as a means which enables language students to express themselves accurately, meaningfully, and appropriately. Therefore, grammar should be taught through the need of communication. In conclusion, the controversy around grammar arose in the first place because it became to be seen as peripheral to the true concerns of language as actually used for communicative purposes. However, the problem is not grammar in itself, but rather how it is dealt with and taught. As a result, our efforts as teachers should be aimed at discovering the best way to unveil its potential as far as communication is concerned. Grammar is important not as something separate from communication, but precisely because it enables communication. Obviously enough, our approach to grammar, like everything in language teaching, shall ultimately depend on our students' needs and learning styles. Be that as it may, the chosen approach should always keep to the assumption that grammar is primarily a device to enhance meaning and communication. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to have a look at the other topics. Like, comment, subscribe, whatever. See you in the next one.